Awareness Month, we are Hello there and a very warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us here for yet another AYLF live stream here at Harry Heights Serviced Apartments in Arboretum. Today being the 30th of April 2021, which of course is wrapping up the Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We are coming live to you with yet another interesting topic, which is my no means no, or does it? And of course, today I have a very, very capable panel with me today. But before I even introduce them, remember that you can engage with us on social media, send in your comments, your questions, or whatever contributions you may have to today's topic, and we'll do our very best to get back to you. My good name is Sharon Chibaibai, and I will be your moderator for today. So let me go ahead and introduce my panel. So from my very far right, I have Ms. Lynette Muga, who is the Gender and Programs Manager at Servant Forge, followed by Pastor David Awagata, who is also the Director of YHub Networks. We have Peter Koira, who is a lawyer, and of course, they are going to be helping us tackle today's conversation. So even before we get on the conversation, I think it's very important for us to start by defining what we mean by sexual assaults, or what we mean by sexual violence. And for this, let me just read out the definition, because then that will form the conversation that we're having today. So sexual assault happens when someone forces or manipulates someone else into unwanted sexual activity without their consent. Now, the reason why this other person or this other individual may not consent would be because of fear, because of their age, because of illness, disability, and or influence of alcohol or other drugs, just to mention a few. So that could be the reason why someone may not consent. Now, from last year, when the pandemic hit, that was in March 2020, we had very many cases of gender-based violence, more so sexual assault cases, and even just watching the news, almost every day you'd hear that someone has been assaulted, someone has been taken advantage of. And of course, this did not happen just here in Kenya, but of course, all around the world. And I remember one case, of course, that also brought up a lot of conversation on social media was the one that happened just last month, of Eunice Wangari, the lady who was, thrown off the 12th floor of a building by the person she was with. And I remember that brought about a lot of conversation. But of course, it's cases like this and it's stories like this that make us wonder, then, are we not having this conversation enough? Is it that people are not aware that, sexual assault is actually detrimental to mental, to physical, and to the emotional health of a person? Or, is there some sort of ignorance that we are trying to overlook? What could be the issue? What could be the problem? And that is why I just want us to just tackle this conversation. It's a very sensitive topic, but it's still a needed topic that needs to be had. So just the other day, I was reading an article that said that, when for women, for example, because you're talking about consent and you're saying that, my no means no. But I was reading an article that was saying that for women, their no could mean yes. And for men, they're entitled to sex, whether kama ni kutuma fea shatuma, that is yes. If it's marriage, they're entitled to it. If it's your boyfriend, your spouse, whoever it is, they're entitled to it. But when it comes to a woman, the moment she says no, then it could automatically mean yes. But let us not focus on the woman for today, because I know we have women, children, and also men who have fallen victims to sexual assault. But now, to kick us off, Koira, from your point of view, rather, according to the law, let us define consent, because sexual assault becomes sexual assault when there is no consent, right? When someone says no and someone else perceives it as a yes. So let's start from there.
Thank you, Ms. Bye-bye. I'm happy to participate in this discussion. For a start, consent, and if you look even into how consent has been defined in the sexual in the statutory act governing the activity, they have defined consent as the free will, the choice that parties undertake to participate in that sexual activity. And number one, there has to be free will, and number two, the law also focuses on the age that minors cannot consent to sex.
Yeah.
That's a fact. And even if someone is not a minor, then once they attain the age of majority, being 18 years, then they have to consent. There has to be that choice that I personally have undertaken to participate in this activity. It's both ways, between the both genders, the male and the female. That is the governing law.
That's the governing law. But today, of course, like we have been talking about before, is that what might mean consent to me might not be the same for someone else. And I think that is then why we have the law to guide us moving forward. But of course, not everyone, again, is conversant with the law and what it stipulates according to consent and the like. So then now now that we know what consent is, I think then now we can now go ahead and have this conversation. Muga, I know you've worked with GBV-related cases with Servant Forge, so you can just tell us what you do at Servant Forge and the contribution that Servant Forge has towards GBV and sexual assault.
Hi again, my name is Lynette. I will talk about what we do at Servant Forge. I am the Gender Programs Manager at SAI Servant Forge. At Servant Forge, our main focus is survivors of gender-based violence, and we are moving from the phrase victims to survivors because these are people who've experienced the worst of the worst but have chosen to still live. They have chosen to still move forward with their life. And so it's good to accord the name survivors because it gives them respect and it destigmatizes from the word victims. So at Servant Forge, we have different programs that focus on prevention and protection against gender-based violence. We have the youth program, which is SEMA. SEMA translates to Speak Out, Love Without Hate. And SEMA mainly works towards awareness creation on gender-based violence and gender issues among the youth. The focus is on the youth. We do this through forums, training, awareness programs, and also activism and activism, where we have different artists coming in and speaking about gender-based violence, either through song, poem, spoken word, just to get the message out there in the simplest of forms. We also have a farm in Lodwar, Turkana, where we have survivors of gender-based violence who have been given a portion of land to farm because most of the people remain in violent situations because of lack of financial freedom. And so once they farm and they're able to provide for their families, they're able to leave such kind of environments that are toxic to them and their children. We also have a rescue center in Machakos, Tala, which is the new center that is a home and a safe haven for children. Most are girls, in Tala, Machakos. And they are just cared for, rehabilitated, counseled, so that they can be the best version of themselves despite what they've been through. So that's in a nutshell, Servant Forge.
And I think I like what you've said about, saying survivors, because most of the time we want to say victims. But, when you say survivor, it means someone who's been able to actually, let's just say, heal, and they're even taking the step towards, moving on from whatever it has happened to them. So I like that you said survivors, and that's really important. You recently posted on your social media about, the contribution that, your male friends have towards this topic. The kind of the responsibility your male friends around, the kind of contribution they have towards, the issue of gender-based violence, or even when you're talking about sexual assault. Could you maybe speak into that and tell us, what was your inspiration behind it?
I think the story that you mentioned for Eunice is what sparked a lot in terms of the conversation on violence and such cases. For me, this was a repost that I felt was necessary. And there are so many other women who are also sharing this. I got it from, I think, Kitna, Kaire, someone like that. And the main focus was gender-based violence is not only a women's issue. Most of the time we find that it's a lot of women versus men, or men versus women. Gender-based violence is mostly an everyone's issue, And so it's more of thanking the men who've come on board to join in the fight against gender-based violence, acknowledging that there are men who face gender-based violence, and also inviting them to the table to give us your ideas, give us what you think we can do to make this issue. And because at the end of the day, it's all of us against gender-based violence. It's not a one-on-one issue, and we need everyone to come on board, not just women, not just children, so that the conversation may be focused towards the main goal, which is to end gender-based violence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that, because it's true that it's not just about women who are supposed to be fighting this issue of gender-based violence. It should be everyone who is fighting towards ending this issue. So, Pasi, I can see you nodding, and I see you really agreeing to what Muga is saying. So, I know you've worked with young people for a very long time. I'm assuming it's a very long time. So, very long time. Good. So, from your interactions with young people, and even from the kind of stories, because I know there's a relationship that you have with young people, and they may be open to opening up the kind of stories that maybe, or issues that they've had. Do you think that, and I know when Muga was talking about destigmatizing, it's very hard for people to, just come up and say that I have once been a victim, because now we are not calling them victims again. I have once been a victim of sexual assault, and this is what I went through. Having the courage to actually say that is very hard, and it's rare for more so young people. So what do you think? Are they, with the young people that you've worked with and the stories that you've had, do you think our young people are more open to talk about such issues? And I know, for example, even when you talk about sex, young people get excited when they are going for a forum and the topic is around sex. But when it comes to sexual assault, when it comes to sexual violence, then someone just wants to go in their cocoon and hide. So do you think it's an open topic that our young people are open to talk about? And if not, what do you think could be the issue?
Thank you, Mr. Baibai. I think one of the things that we need to understand is already just sex in itself is a very private thing. Now, sexual assault just adds a whole level of shame, of fear, and of course there's intimidation. By the time there's sexual assault, there's definitely somebody who took advantage of someone, intimidated them, and many of them have a threat attached. If you say, especially if it's a minor, if you say that this happened, this is what is going to happen to you, or I will chase you down and I will do this. And I've encountered quite a number of such cases. We did a whole month on GBV on YHub, and just when you put out the poster, almost immediately you start getting messages coming in, people just sharing their stories. And it's so sad that one of the worst parts of sexual assault is that many people don't believe the victim. One of the cases I had to deal with is a lady who tells me she was raped at 13. And up to now, she knows, even if she tried to raise it then, and now as an adult, even if she went to her parents and said, this is the man who did this to me, they will not believe her over him. And so it's very important to be able to get us to a place where we can have this conversation and shed light. Unfortunately, what Muga said, it's not a men versus women. And so whenever something like this comes up, it's like the men gang up and say, what if alitumiwa fea akakuja? What if she had, sent all those hints and signs? And sometimes people do something without necessarily wanting to go all the way. Yes. I can have coffee with her. It doesn't mean it's consent. She came, yes, but did she come because there was an end game? And and is she part of that end game? I could have an end game, but does she have an end game? Mm-hmm. And so unfortunately we forget this, and we assume that we are on the same page on all these things. Mm-hmm. And we don't even pause to say, what do you think? Unfortunately now sex has been thrown out of marriage, and it's all over in the streets, in the offices, in the parking lot, and so finding consent, because it was very clear when it was within marriage, mm-hmm. That you go through all this, and then when you get married, this will happen. Now, fair ikitumwa, iko, Mtu akikuita uitike, iko.
Yeah.
You know, and so we need to begin to ask ourselves, have we cheapened sex to the level that we cannot understand where consent begins and where assault starts?
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Just to read a few, I'm seeing people are already engaging with us on social media. So Thomas Nudi is saying, public awareness is key in curbing sexual violence. Thank you for that, Thomas. Mary Peter is saying, great talk. Keep it up. Thank you, Mary. We also have Musa Kamusa who says, when we speak about sexual assault, is it men perpetrated only? Yeah, that's a very important question, and we are going to be covering up. We're going to be covering that soon. So keep engaging with us, keep sending in your questions, whatever comments that you may have, and of course, we will get back to you. So, Pasi, your story, fair and everything. So even as the way we were just saying, like right now, consent is not, the consent that maybe Koira was telling us about. People have, various definitions of what consent is. So sometimes we don't know where to draw the line. I mean, the line has become so blurred that when someone does anything, like you said, even if they weren't willing to go all the way, it's just interpreted automatically that they did actually want to go all the way. So Koira, when you were telling us about the definition of, consent, and of course, when you refer to the law, it just reminded me of this past month, we've been having the GSC interviews for the next incoming CJ. And I remember one of the candidates was asked about the Sexual Offense Act of 2006. And when she was asked, if it has, served the purposes for which it was enacted, somewhere po katikati, she was blank and silent. So maybe, I don't know, do people even know about this Sexual Offense Act that is in the government that protects people? But even before you tell us that, just briefly tell us what it's all about, and if you think it has served the purposes for which it was enacted.
I looked at the Sexual Offences Act. I followed up on the interview of the JSC. And one thing that came out clearly is that even after the enactment of Sexual Offences Act, yes, to some extent, it has managed to serve, because people are being taken to prison, and being faced with sexual offense charge, it's quite a serious charge. In fact, the minimum that you can get, if that involved defilement, it's 20 years. And if it's on account of rape, maybe even to life imprisonment. So can tell you for a fact there are so many people, young men, languishing in prison because of commission of that act. But I feel like as we progress, then there are certain situations where the law hasn't really helped so far. And much as sentencing is only one aspect to deal with GBV, but it cannot be the only cure towards solving this solution. So the society has to find ways to try and actually ensure that we live in zero GBV issues. Yes.
And even saying that, I know that sometimes even if someone is taken to court, for example, there are also those cases that are just settled out of court. Maybe this person is just given money and told the person who maybe was the victim of the sexual assault or GBV, they don't really get the justice which they actually deserved at that particular moment. I even know of a story of someone who was actually just told to go slash a compound of a police station because of what they did. So of course, if you are the person who was wronged, would you really find any, should I say, closure when you see that someone this is how this situation has been handled? That what happens is that and maybe that is why people are not really willing even to go ahead and mention these cases, because sometimes, maybe the law won't protect you, because let's remember that there are people who have privilege, people who are privileged in so many instances, and they just, cases just get piled and shelved like all the rest. I see you're smiling. Maybe you can.
I'm just laughing because it's one of the most upsetting things because, and I say, and I like what you say, that it's not just about having a law. It's not just about punishing a person. Now, it's about finding remedy before somebody's life is messed up. Because when you rape a 13-year-old, you've messed up their life. When you take advantage of this girl was thrown out of the 12th floor of a building. Their life will probably never be the same again if they survive. And these are the ones we know. And it's interesting that you mentioned you have a project in Northeastern, because there's cases in Northeastern that are just some of the most ridiculous, where these kids are taken out into early marriage, and the community is the one that fights to protect the old man who is taking these kids. So we have a problem that is cultural. We have a problem that is social. With bloodlines, we've refused to protect the weak among us. And that's why you're talking about people who have privilege. You're talking about people who know who to call. I know a guy. And the I know a guy people have messed up our culture, because that kid will grow up. You never know what you turn them into. Because you might think, they will just recover and go on with life. And in the US, they say some of the serial killers are people who've gone through abuses in their childhood or in their youth. And they decide, this is how you treat me, then this is what I'm going to do. I'll just, go into this crazy mode of doing such things. And so we need to, first of all, remove the thing of its punishment for the one who has done, and ask ourselves, what is causing it? One of the biggest causes of this thing, pornography. A guy watches pornography. Every woman in porn is consenting. So it's wondering why this normal one here is not behaving like the ones I'm seeing on the screen. And perception is king. I always tell people, perception is king. What I perceive becomes my principle of living. So I can't imagine that a woman can say no. So what happens? I watch porn, and then now I come, I see this girl, I tell her, I send fare, she comes, and I know that I've not seen any film where a woman said no. They never have periods, they never have headaches, they never have, it's only details. So let's ask ourselves, what are we consuming that is causing us to have such an attitude towards sex and towards even not asking for consent at that point?
Just to add on the cultural issues that Pastor has talked about, you find that, for instance, in areas like Northeastern, they love solving their issues through, communities. Was there they are called and they solve that issue. But if you look at the law, criminal actions, criminal issues are supposed to be dealt with actually in court. They are not supposed to be taken out. But even if the court was to sustain a conviction, then it is based on the complainant coming forward, the victim coming forward and say so and so was raped. If they cannot come forward and to be able to sustain throughout the entire trial process, then that really becomes an issue even for the judiciary to be able to attain several convictions in regards to those issues. And some of them, they'll just seek to withdraw the case, and when the magistrate declines to withdraw the case, they'll not show up in court. Who are you going to prosecute at that juncture? No one. So, because most of all these sexual assault normally happens to informal settlement, where their income is really quite an issue. For instead of someone seeking justice, restorative justice, by seeing that person who has committed that act, sentenced to prison, paying for that crime, and they come and say, hey, just take this 20,000 and let's just solve that issue there and then. They'll opt for the money instead for the justice. And I think that's where also we have an issue with.
So what then is the role of women in this conversation? Because even right now, even the way we are speaking, we know that when we talk about GBV, or even all forms of GBV, which also include sexual assault, we have very many cases where it's the man being the perpetrator and then the woman being the victim, yeah? So then what role does the woman play in this conversation? Is there something that the woman needs to know? Because I mean, even the Pasi you were saying, sometimes you can just show up for coffee with a friend, and him in his mind, he knows us, after this, we are going all the way. But for you, me, I'm just there to have coffee and I'm just there to hang out. So what do you, what is the role that our women are playing in this conversation? Maybe we can start with you, Muga. Then we can, maybe, what is the role of women in this conversation of gender-based violence?
I think that based on, this train of thought that is around here, I'm not sure if you're asking the role of women in violence prevention in such a scenario, because in my thinking and in my line of thought, I feel like we are told so many things that women should do and women should not do. And that's where the problem begins, because you will tell me, don't wear this, don't walk at night, don't talk to this one, don't write about this, don't showcase your body, don't wear too much makeup, don't drink at night. Why are you leaving your drink unattended to? Don't do that. Why are we telling women such things? You're saying that so that we don't get raped, we don't get abused. Why don't we just say, stop raping, stop abusing? There's a very thin line between telling people what not to do to avoid rape without addressing the issue that is rape itself. We need to move the conversation from stop doing this to actually just period, stop violence. Women are on board. Women are saying no means no. Women are saying let's end gender-based violence, right? Children can speak for themselves, but some can't. We've seen cases where very small children are abused and you cannot actually find a reason as to why this is even acceptable in society, And his story, I think fairs inatumwa sana. But the idea is, do we need to have an open conversation for I'm inviting you for coffee so that thereafter we may sleep together, so that I know for a fact this is what is happening and then this is happening? Or is it just, let's go for coffee and I'm thinking, okay, we're going to have a drink. But as Basia said, kumbe you have plan B, plan C, And every time the question always comes, why did she go? Wanawake tunajipeleka na, what did you expect? You went on a date, you went all the way to 13th floor, alafu unakata. What did you expect? There's nothing that warrants the death of someone. Every human life is important. And when I say no, I don't think we need to define what no is. It's as simple as those two letters. It's just no. No does not mean maybe. I don't think I would say no and mean maybe and let it be that a weak no is still a no. If I say no, it doesn't change the meaning than if I say no. So it's not no makes you think, let's continue. A no is no. And at the end of the day, I believe even if you go to court and you're asked, did you say no? And she said, no, alisema hivi. No. The judge will be like, oh, I know what you mean. No, it's as simple as the meaning of no is defined, and it's no. And I think the role of women is, here I would say, to speak out more. Once these cases happen, let's speak out. Let's also encourage the men to speak out, to come on board. It's not a backlash. It's not, let's tell men. We are always saying, stop raping us, which is true, because women are raped by men. And there are so many cases, because gender now has been diversified, and many people subscribe to he, she, they, and that's okay. But we also need to understand that women and men, children, however you view yourself, your role in this is to end, not to, to stir the pot, to, I've forgotten the term, but it's like to incite, not to incite, or to say, oh, now they're coming for us men, let's do this, or now they're coming for us women, let's fight against men. We need to encourage all of us to speak the same voice with the same volume, Yeah, that's what I would add on to that.
Pasi?
I like what Muga said. Now, just adding to this is one, we need to remove this conversation from being gender-based, that it's women, versus men. And we are trying to fight this battle, and the women are winning now, and then now the men are winning. Because the moment you do that, you lose out on the best possible partner to handle this battle. If men say, no, we will not do this, and women say, no, we will not, put ourselves in a position where because the strength of a woman is in seduction. Let's face it. She doesn't have to say anything. She doesn't even, she just has to peter with another kaswag over there. Where Kwisha? The strength of a man is in pursuit. Right? And so at the moment he feels there's like a hint that this girl is seducing me or seductive towards me, they begin to follow the chase. Whether they were planning to or not, they were going to work. Kidogo, hey, boss, I'm not coming. Napitia mahali. So we need to remove that thing of it's this gender versus that gender. And we've had so much conversations around this thing of this gender, that gender. It is detrimental to anything we will do in our fight against GBV, against sexual violence, because it just throws it back to, oh, it's just them trying to do this against us. Secondly, we are living in a very sexualized world, extremely sexualized. Every conversation, I can tell you, almost every other conversation here, even as a pastor, you will land on sexually connotated conversations because it's just become that. When you say hi to somebody, they're already thinking, kona ma abs. And because that's what we see every day. That's what is presented to us. That's what was on our Facebook. That's what is on Twitter. That's what is on IG. That is what is on TV. That is what every soap opera is about. And so because of that very sexualized perception, every conversation is 2 steps from a sexual conversation. Every invitation is 2 steps from a sexual engagement. And we need to just begin to step back. That's why I mentioned about porn. I mentioned about, just the kind of circles we hang out in. There was an article that was written called Cards and Dads. And Cards and Dads talks about the loose, happy-go-lucky guys are called cards. And then the focused guys who want to raise a family, be consistent with this one woman are called dads. And they said they did a research and they looked in any society where there were cards, the women dressed more seductively, were ready to receive fare, and all those things. Where there were dads, the women dressed more modestly, were, prime and proper in their interaction with men. And they said, they noticed that the moment they pulled this card of making the guys cards, the women shifted. When they moved the guys and told them, behave like that, the women shifted. They responded to the men. And so we need to ask ourselves, are we fighting, are we trying to, what is it called? Are we trying to empower the wrong source? Because she's saying, you're telling the women, you dress up, you you avoid drinking at the night, avoid this. But are we addressing the wrong person? Because if the guys stop raping, then the women don't have to hide themselves. If I know that if I stand here and there's a guy next to me, I am safe because there's a guy next to me. And I always like to ask, are the women around you safe because of you or in spite of you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Just to read a comment here. So King Tosh is saying, lovely insights, Muga. We should focus on the rape and not telling women not what to do, because not always people who are raped who are wearing short dresses or rather walking at night, but with people they trust. We also have Bethy, who is saying, what does this do to the mental health of the survivors? And of course, that we will tackle very soon. Musa is asking also, do we neglect red flags? Because in as much as a coffee date doesn't mean consent, but then is it good for one to attend to coffee 156 times without a second thought? Or is it time when we say, when the deal is too good? Okay. Or when a lady or a gentleman goes off for a sleepover with strangers, is it a good thing? Is it ignorance, or should we say the primary school lesson, don't speak to a stranger? Is there a sense of ignorance in how we handle these issues too? Red flags. Red flags. Okay. Who would like to speak into that? Koira? That, you know, you've gone for 156 coffee dates. Surely, are you not thinking about it too?
156 dates. Hey. Okay. But I think what I would really want to say, nothing justifies sexual assault. That's the baseline. Nothing justifies sexual assault. No means no. But also there's also another aspect that that is also factual. Making money is difficult. It's a difficult process for one to try and make money. And so men, because I think statistically those are the biggest perpetrators in terms of numbers, have been indoctrinated that once you have cash, you'll be able to entertain girls, and then girls will laugh at you. But I mean, the narrative is changing. A girl will just come 156 dates and you'll get nothing out of it, and she'll walk away.
Yeah.
And
but instead, you have to get something.
Yes, that's a very good question, Tasi.
No, it's also it's the intention behind calling someone for a date. I mean, if for instance I've fallen in love with a particular girl, it's not bad for me to invite her for a date, you see. But I think there has to be clear communication that I'm calling this because I'm attracted to you, and it's my desire for me to take this thing forward and everything. So, from her perspective now, she'll be able to judge, okay, can I go? How do I then proceed from here? What's the next stage? If her answer to that is no, then people should be able to accept that the rejection concept. I think men should really be able to accept that, hey, you tried it and you missed it.
So let's turn this around, because now, this conversation, I think so far we've now been talking about where it's the man or the male who is the perpetrator. So do we know of instances where this situation is all around, where it's now me, the girl, inviting Koira for a cup of coffee with the hope that after this, we are going to happen? Do we know of cases where this has happened, where men have actually found themselves in a situation where they've actually said no, but the lady is saying yes? Your no means something completely different, because I'm also seeing Musa is saying a lady can be saying nikona baba rent, wa fare, wa token, etc. Do we know of cases where it's actually the lady who is instigating this, even when clearly consent has already been defined that I don't want to do this, but do we know of, or our men, you as men, are you even comfortable to even come and say, man, this mama came up to me and I wanted to say, because I know men, sometimes you can be seated in your baraza and you're talking, and then your fellow guys are like, what? Ati ulikata, you said no. I know sometimes now that can make you even be more afraid, or even more, I don't know. Are we relating to this in any form of way?
Let me give two stories. One was actually, I think, in the news, where taxi drivers were sharing the stories of their experiences at night. And this cab driver actually said, sometimes you take this lady home and she says, sina do. So kule kitu alafu uende. This is a story of a taxi driver, and it's like, I'm not the only one. When we sit as taxi drivers and talk about what we experience in the night, apart from wale wa kusema nishukishe hapa, alafu they take off over the fence and into their house, there's also those guys who say, I can't pay you with cash, but here.
In this case, did the taxi driver say no? Because PA can invite you to cooler this thing, and then we cover the fare, and you may say, you can just go ahead and say yes.
The taxi driver has a family. He's trying to fend for his family. He's not starved. But because now also the girl is beautiful, and this is the problem of being a hunter, and this is the makeup of a man. It's very different from the makeup of a woman. That's why you hear, even when it comes to sexual assault or predatory behavior, you will rarely hear that a man says, "Enyewe, hiyo nilinyemelewa." Why? Because the guy will feel like it is, like you've said, you dropped the ball. Yani she said, ndo hii alafu kakata, boss. Uko sawa. But then at the end of the day, if he's a dad, for you, let me use that statement, that word. He will feel he has robbed himself of a certain value that he lives by. If he has a family that he's raising and he catches a disease in the process, he will not look back at that day and say, anyway, nilijienjoy, because he has messed it up. You get? Now, because, and that's why I say the ladies work on the side of seduction. And so we rarely, by the time somebody is excited about what he's being seduced about, we feel like it's not his fault or he's not been abused. But the reality is, he didn't go there with the desire to. A second story I wanted to share is a guy who went to work in an office and he didn't know what the story was in the office. Kumbe, these girls in the office had a deal that when a new staff member comes in, we want to see who will bed him the first. So this guy is invited for lunch. Staff, goes for lunch, and lunch is served, and then other things are served. And the guy actually was engaged to be married. And this is a pastoral case that now we were dealing with. It's years back. And now he has a girlfriend who he's not slept with, because he's saying, I'm waiting until we get married. Now, trying to get to understand and explain to your girlfriend that what I have refused to do with you because of honor, I have done with somebody I don't even know beyond work. I don't know if the marriage happened or if they were able to survive that, but that is a blot. You can call it he was consensual because he's an adult, he agreed, but something is fundamentally wrong with that picture. He didn't go for that lunch to go and mess up. Yeah. So guys get caught up.
Let's talk about consent. Yeah? When we were talking about consent, you said that being drunk is not consent. Silence is not consent. Passing out is not consent. Being asleep is not consent. Lack of mental clarity is not consent. Being disabled is not consent. Yeah? Cora said consent is free will. Yeah? And I think I would like to put it as clear as possible. If you do not say yes to something, in this context, you have been abused. I think that it is as clear as and as plain as simple as that. Whether you're a male, female, or a child, if you do not freely and willingly say yes to something, you have been abused. And I've had cases where men are abused. I've had cases where men have been sexually assaulted, and most of them don't speak out because of the stigma that Percy is talking about. Because men are perceived to be strong, to always say yes, to always want sex, to always love sex, to always choose it above anything else, And it is that line that has become so blurred to other men that when a man comes up and says, I've been assaulted, it's now a disgrace. It's now a, hey, mwanaume, na unasema, na unaongea, And we have different men who've spoken out about this, and some of them have even gone on social media, they're very well known, who've spoken about the abuse story. But the comments that come in from men, and even some women, it just, if you don't have the grace, I would say, if you don't have the grace of God, you would easily crumble, and the effects would really be dire to you as a person, and also to other men who've been abused, because then it silences them eventually, and immediately they're not able to speak out. And so men do get abused. 1 in 9 men get abused. 1 in 4 women get abused. And I think that is why you have more women speaking out, because the cases are more with women compared to men. However, it happens. It's the reality of life that men do get abused. Most of them perhaps experience it in a different way, let's say when they're younger and they don't have control. And other cases come the way Percy has talked about, but men do get abused. The only problem, and I would say the only trigger, is the reaction they get once they get bold enough to speak out about this. Because I think to men, it's not easy for a man to say they've been abused compared to a woman. It's not easy for a man to be reported and, hey, I'll be in the Standard, page 1, my face. And maybe their boys know that undo bazenga, undo ulemse, and then you see they don't speak about it. But just to answer the question you asked, there are cases where men get abused.
Now let's talk about parties that cannot necessarily maybe speak out, like children, for example. Because, for example, an infant, surely, how can, and that then will bring me to where now even our safe spaces have already been blurred, because you imagine that, you're even leaving your child at home. You're imagining that your child is safe when you're going to work. For example, right now, you find in a home, all parents are working, so the child is being left with the house manager or whoever is taking care of the house, and then you find that this is the person who is assaulting your child. Or even in cases where it's parents, unfortunately, who have gone ahead to assault their children. And for a child, maybe even when someone is an infant or at a certain age, it can be very hard for them to speak up and say that, this and this has happened to me. Or even if they are of age, let's say they're at an age where they can actually speak up and say this happened. Of course, you find there are cases where a child is being threatened that, ukisema hii, I'll do this to you. And we've heard of these stories. So before you even go and talk about the safe spaces, because of time, Koira, do we have laws that protect children? Do we have laws that protect children? And are we even aware of these laws? Because again, the law is out there to protect us, to protect our rights and our freedoms. But sometimes, because we don't even know of these things, sometimes we just continue, dying with our own issues and, the kind of things that have been done to us. So do we have laws that protect children, and do you think we're even aware of them? Do you think the public is aware of such laws?
They always say that ignorance of the law is not defense, but I think it should be the responsibility of the state to ensure that there's quite a lot of civic education in regards to the legal safeguards that have been put in place. And yes, first, I would really want to respond to the issues of, I earlier said that making money is quite a hard process. And, just like any other thing, people have been oriented to think that where you invest your money, then there must really be returns. And, we also, people are different. We get into all this relationship aspect thinking that we men are all the same, females are all the same. Just as you have pointed out, there are women out here who brag that kuna wa rent, kuna wa tokens, kuna wa Naivasha Safari Rally, na kuna wa Mombasa Diani. But you see, and if such kind of a person then goes with that kind of an attitude and abuses a man, because that is a form of abuse. I came to you with a genuine feeling to show affection, and then I'm just put at the periphery and I'm told kazi yako ni kulipa rent, and you see that is not communicated in clear terms. How I will react to that, it's quite different. As in, if all of us are drivers and have driving licenses and we go through Thika Road, not everyone is a same driver. We have had actually drivers that have caused mayhem, and we also need to address that aspect of how people tend to abuse other people in relationship, because you cannot guarantee the level of anger that someone has and how they will respond. And in relation to the issues of now minor and the law, actually it's such a serious charge. The law says that children of tender years, that is 9 years and below, if you defile that kind of person, then rest assured you're going to prison for a lifetime. If you defile, if for instance you just commit an indecent act, even if you just decide to touch the breast or any part of her body, then you'll go inside for around 10-15 years in prison. So it is that serious. As to whether people know that law, then that is another issue. There has to be a lot of civic education done to it, so that we are able to quell that social vice. That's what I'll say.
Safe spaces, because when a child gets assaulted in their own home, then it means a home is no longer a safe space. And also the church per se, you also know that sometimes even going to the church, because when I define safe spaces, I know the church and the home to be a safe space.
Yeah.
But we have instances where, like I said, the parent is the one also assaulting the child. And we have instances where church leaders, or even other members of the church are, taking advantage of one another. So, I mean, now I want you to speak to this as a dad, as a father, and also as, as a pastor. What do you think could be the problem? Because like the story you shared where someone clearly told the parents that this is the man who assaulted me. This is the person who took advantage of me, but the parents choose to believe the perpetrator over their own daughter. I mean, surely there has to be something that is wrong.
Now, I'll tell you the funniest part of, not the funniest, but the most gory part of this story, that the guy who did this is a pastor. And the person who actually, and we talked about this a bit with Ichebai, and I was telling you, if you need somebody who can share their story, she's willing to share the story. The saddest part of it is that now as an adult, she says, up till now, I still don't think my parents would believe my words over this guy. He's part of the family. He's the family counselor in a sense. And she said, these are the words she said. My family will trust him 1,000 times more than trust me. This is now a person who's an adult. This happened years ago at 13. And so we've had this conversation. Actually, the last conversation we had on YHub was GBV. What is the role of the church? And unfortunately, the church has harbored both perpetrator and victim within its pews. Some of the perpetrators are church leaders. And I've been in church long enough to know that it's not a secret. We've had conversations in the Vatican about, priests who have raped, or sodomized the boys who work within there. And so we need to ask ourselves critical questions because there are three people involved here. One, it's the family, which is the fundamental unity of society. Number two, it's the church, the communities of faith. You can talk about the mosque, the temple, whoever. And three, there's the state. These three have to work together. The family, which is part of the community, to be able to safeguard the child, to be able to safeguard the woman, to be able to safeguard the boy, because all these guys are at risk. You don't build one and leave the other. The communities of faith, because we are kind of custodians of values. That's why we say, you know what, you have to get married to get this thing. This thing of attitude, tuma fair. Hata kama ni tuma fair kutoka India. You still have to marry this person. It's honorable to be able to get them to say to their parents, I'm getting married to this person. And as I give myself as they give them to you, then now there is consent. I don't think there is a greater honor to a woman than to say, before I touch you, I'll put a ring in your finger. And the moment you remove that end to it, you've cheapened that girl. Like it or not, you can say, oh, any passy is, I'm any passy. But that's the truth. You do not have a right to that beautiful woman's body without saying, I want you to, with my body, I honor you. With all I am, I give myself to you. Hizo zingine za sijui tuma fair. Well, tuma fair, tuma hata ya ticket. Jipange nayo. There is no right it gives you to this woman's body. Neither does it give you to this man's body unless you've made that commitment. For a child, for children, pedophilia has become a big thing. Unfortunately, this world has no end to the sin that it brings. Pedophilia has become a fad. In some countries, actually, it's become a trade. I think, is it Indonesia, where it's a big thing, where they steal kids from homes and go and use them as child prostitutes. Kids from as young as 6 years old. Because there are men who believe that if they sleep with a child, they will rejuvenate their youth. Cultic stuff. And so people are losing kids by the thousands. And if you hear the stories about child trafficking and sex trafficking in this world, it's such a crazy world. So guys, we have to stop at this point and ask ourselves, where do we really want to go with this? Where do we want to go with
the behaviors that we are abetting. Where are we going with this thing of protect this guy because he's so famous, he's so important in the city, he can't just be taken to court. Some of our members of parliament should be in jail now as we speak. Some of our governors should be in jail now as we speak, and we know some of them. But I know a guy.
I think when we are talking about safe spaces in this sense, I feel like personally when coronavirus it came to Kenya, the cases of gender-based violence tripled. And we know that, of course, most affected was women and children. And this is because to some people, to some children, school was a safe space. That is the reality. Yes. And now they're confined home. The rules, are they rules that the state put in place to contain the COVID-19 virus, yes, they're there, but they also had effects on gender-based violence. And we see gender-based violence as a shadow pandemic that came after COVID-19 because of the tripling of the cases. And this lockdown has you, a victim or a survivor of abuse, confined in the same space as your perpetrator, as abusers, as potential abusers. So thinking beyond sexual assault, there's physical violence, there is emotional abuse, that if you combine these three, it's detrimental to a human being. And we see that how the measures have been put in place, the side effects that come with it, people, the poverty levels are going lower and lower, people are struggling, people are frustrated. This frustration is being shown in the homes. The only way people are finding themselves having to release that is in form of abuse, and mostly because there's an unequal power play at home, you know. And so if I'm coming home, I've lost my job, but you are going to work, and I am the man, I'm supposed to be the one who's caring for my family. It's frustrating for me, and it's very easy to show out that in an angered manner. And I would like to applaud, I think it's the Makueni governor, who used the COVID funds to create a safe space in his county. That's the first safe space that we have from the state that is actually well functioning, and it's very well equipped to help abusers. No, to help survivors of violence. Sorry, let me come correct. Yeah, and I think more can be done if only people follow their values and remove the selfishness that comes in and put the focus on ending gender-based violence. I think there's so much more that can be done to create safe spaces and safe homes that are state-owned, because everyone pays taxes. That means everyone has a right to be protected by its government, if I'm not wrong. So we want to shift from private safe homes to having more state-owned safe homes, so that people can get more help, and church-owned, so that more people can get help as deserved.
And just thinking into that, I remember Pasi was saying that people who have become abused and maybe they weren't able to heal, they weren't able to get help healing, because also healing on your own can be very hard, especially when, for example, in that instance where your parents choose to believe the perpetrator over yourself. There are so many effects. Now let's talk about the effects that are there. There are permanent effects like the ones that we know where women, or even men rather, but we've had a lot of femicide cases where women have ended up being killed just because they said no, or just because they refused to consent to whatever activity that was going to happen. But that is a more permanent consequence. But let's talk about the mental issues that are there, physical, emotional, that be it a child, a man or a woman who has been abused has to endure even before they can even be able to stand in front of people, even on social media, and be willing to share their story. And like you said, people who are not able to heal properly, they end up becoming, or they end up landing in dysfunctional relationships, for example, maybe because they do not know what a healthy relationship is supposed to look like. So Koira, maybe we can start with you. What are some of the effects that you have seen, or the ones that you know that are there for people who have become victims more and not really survivors? Because we know survivors who have been able to actually heal, but let's talk about the victims.
I think what majorly is being communicated out here is the mental trauma that comes with it, and some of them actually contributing to the idea that, hey, men are trash. If this is the case of a lady that has been sexually assaulted by men, so they actually develop that phobia against men, and they'll never see anything good with men. And for me, one of the things that I'll propose, I'll not so much incline into the religious world, but I'll actually implore everyone to, if, for instance, you're a victim, you see, you can use the courts of law to get the justice that person pays. But other than that, these you as a victim, you really need to heal. Then what do? I'll also recommend the use of professionals. You seek health care. I mean, we have psychologists who can actually help you, take you through the entire process, that you come out as a survivor. As just Muga has said, that you've conquered what really used to give you that mental trauma. That for me can be one of the most approaches that I'll recommend. Yes.
Percy?
This is a conversation we've had over time. Just talking about healing. One, I think the church has done a lot of work in just helping develop the counseling section. I think the biggest counseling courses are being taught by church-based universities, Park University, Daystar University. I think USIU has also developed a very strong counseling program. So there's a lot of trained personnel in terms of counseling. Unfortunately, and this is where there is a gap, and I think you guys as lawyers need to be able to help us with this. Insurances don't pay for therapy. I don't think there is an insurance firm I've had that covers counseling, trauma counseling, abuse and all that. They only treat medical cases. And so we need to be able to advocate that insurances also cover for psychological care of the patients, because 60%, 70% of illness is psychological. And so why treat the physical, yet this thing is presenting in the psychological? There's a rape that happened. This child is depressed about what has happened, and they don't know who to reach out to. And if you go to a counselor, it's 3K. A fair good counselor will charge you 3K an hour. You need to have 5 sessions a week. How much is that? How many Kenyans can afford that? And knowing that informal settlements is where a lot of these abuses happen. So let's legislate that we have counseling covered under the regular insurance NHIF policies in the country. Number 3, let us deal with the issue at the root, not at the fruit. Unfortunately, we are very good at getting to, arrest and charge. But how about safeguarding this person? The biggest mistake I think we have, and which is causing a lot of this thing, is the economic injustices. We have a and when COVID happened, it just opened the bottom, and people fell into the poverty line in huge numbers. We are not doing anything to cushion what is happening. And this is both state, this is religious organization, this is the community. And instead of that, the trickle-down effect we are using is kutuma fair. We need to deal with it, because an empowered woman is a woman who has a voice. She can say no. She doesn't have to take fare. She can come on her own right, on her own merit, and go back on her own merit. Same thing with an empowered man. Let us be able to build the economic strength of our people, because otherwise somebody will take advantage of them with the 10 shillings, with the 1,000 shillings that they have in their hand. Thank you.
Final thoughts?
I think for the effects on an individual level would be depression, anxiety, PTSD, stigmatization. When we go to a family level, we are also looking at stigmatization. We are looking at being shunned from the community, from some people. We are looking at broken families, where families decide to disagree and separate ways. From a community level, we can see an increase in poverty levels, because most people who are survivors of abuse tend to keep to themselves, and some might not even go to work especially. And so we see a decline in economic improvement as a community and as a country. For me, what I would say is, let's try and work on prevention. Prevention is better than cure. And let's create more awareness. Let's sensitize more people. The more you're aware, I believe the common phrase that says people perish because of lack of knowledge. Knowledge is power, and there's so much you can do with it. And so I think creating more awareness on each and every section that has to do with gender-based violence, and by that I mean educate people on when you go to the police, this is what you expect when you're reporting. When you're going to a lawyer, this is the help you expect. This is what the judicial system will take you through. When you go to hospital, this is what you will find when you seek help at that end. When you go for counseling or to the church for help, this is what you expect to receive. So that a survivor can be fully aware all round and wholesomely the kind of help that they can get on all angles, because you can treat by counseling but forget physical, and you can forget to report, meaning that you don't get your justice, and justice delayed is justice denied. So it's more or less trying to cover this person in a wholesome manner so that they can get help, create awareness on the numbers, the hotline numbers that are free, because counseling is expensive. For children, it's 116. It's that simple. If you suspect your neighbor, or if you suspect that there's cases of violence around you and it's a child involved, it's 116. It is both in Swahili or English. It gives you all the steps that you need. For adults, it's 1195, where you can get a counselor on board as fast as possible. It's toll-free. It's 24 hours. It works in all counties. It's the national toll-free helplines, yeah. For counseling, I know 1190 works as well, which moves you away from, it's not necessarily gender-based violence cases, but so many people are going through things, and if you need to talk to someone, and most people are afraid of a face-to-face situation, 1190 gives you a chance to talk to a professional who is paid by the state, and you're able to get the help you need. So let's spread the numbers, let's create more awareness, let's avoid stigmatizing, and let's also cancel the cancel culture, if that is understood. I think there's so much canceling. Oh, he said this, let's cancel them. They lose their jobs, let's cancel this person, let's cancel this person. It's valid, but at the end of the day, did they learn the lesson? That's the question that we need to ask ourselves. At the end of the day, was the message passed, and this person, did they fully internalize the depth of their wrong? And did they get corrected in a way that made them feel like, okay, this is what I did, and this is what I need to be doing thereafter? Because people need to stop this perception of, oh, of course I didn't mean it. I have a daughter, I have a sister, I have a boyfriend, I have a girlfriend. So how can I talk to this person like that when they're abused? See, me niko na sister. The fact remains, you're a human being. This other person is a human being. So once they are violated, you don't get to relate it to something that is personal to you to excuse violence. So let's hold ourselves accountable. Each and every one of us was given a voice. Let's use it accordingly to end gender-based violence.
Thank you. That's such a powerful way of wrapping up. And because of time, I know we may want to continue this conversation because it's really needed. But thank you so much, guys, for even speaking into it for the time that we have. And I think also it's very important for me to mention that AYLF will also be working to provide counseling services. So, of course, we're also saying that it's okay for you to speak up if you know anyone, or if you also have become you have been affected in one way or another. You're always invited to speak up, and there's always going to be someone who is going to help. And I'm just going to pick a few things that I have picked from the conversation. Number one is that when you talk about sexual assault, we're not focusing on one gender. It's not a gender-based conversation. This is a conversation that everyone needs to have. That is both male, both female. This is something that we need to address as human beings and not as one gender or another, because both men and women get abused. Another thing is what Pasi said, is that let's deal with the issues from the root and not from the fruit. And I think that also speaks into what Muga said, that prevention is better than cure. And of course, once again, we are saying, just as Korea said, that nothing justifies sexual assault, nothing at all. If someone said no, then it means it's a no. If they said no and they were, maybe muttering kidogo, it's still a no. And also something else that maybe Muga pointed out is the hotline numbers. Remember, if maybe you're not willing to go for counseling, we have the hotline numbers, and I'm sure they're going to be left on the comment section, so that if at any one point or another, you either know someone who needs to talk to someone, then the hotline numbers are available for both minors and for adults. So we're going to leave them in the comment section for you to take note of them. Let me just read something that someone has just sent to me here. So, dear men, this is what we are saying. Thank you for protecting us from other men. Thank you for understanding that harassment and subsequent fear is real and not imagined. Please believe our experiences without being defensive. Don't be part of the problem. When you keep quiet, when men are harassing us, you become those men. Call out sexist comments when you hear them. Yes, we know it's tiring. We do it every single day, and deal with just relax comments. You know, when ladies are told just relax, we'd love to relax and just enjoy being here, but we can't. And I think this also applies to women as well. So thank you for that. And of course, if you sent in a comment and a question and that we weren't able to get back to you, we'll do so in the comment section. But other than that, thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you for engaging with us, for sending your comments. Remember, this is a conversation that needs to be had, and it's not stopping here. We'll continue having this conversation. So even if you're a small group member, go ahead and have this conversation in your small groups, wherever it is, in your churches, your places of worship, in your homes, your offices. Let us keep this conversation going, because I'm sure we all have the desire to achieve a utopia where we have that, these issues of gender-based violence are tackled and are cured. We cannot forget to thank and appreciate our host, that is Harry Heights Harvest Apartments here in Arboretum. They offer conference and accommodation facilities, as well as grounds for events and parties. Their contacts should be running at the bottom of your screen. A big thank you also goes to Anto Anix Productions for facilitating today's live stream. Thank you so much, Anto. And for all other audiovisual production services, and of course for AYLF for making this possible. Remember, we have monthly AYLF live streams. So if you have any topic that you'd like us to tackle, you can always send it. You can always drop them on the comment section. You can always get in touch with us, and we'll do our best to tackle them and have the conversation. My name is Chabaibai. I have been your moderator. And once again, thank you for joining us. Have a good one. Goodbye.